Thank you very much, Jay, and very good evening to us all. It's really great to be here again, and asante sana for giving me an opportunity to come in and continue with this exciting conversation. It's really exciting just to be able to speak about culture, and of course, the question about culture first leaders and culture first leadership. What is it? How do we achieve it? How do we propagate it? And how do we ensure it becomes a reality? It's not just something good to talk about and what we hear from our inspiring leadership gurus away from our own organizations, but we can actually identify with it and can be a reality in our day-to-day life. So very quickly before we go much further into this, I'd just love to get a little bit of a feel of those who were with us last time. So if you were here with us last time, just drop an I in the chat and I'll know you are there. And then, of course, we can continue around, where we've picked up from. So just put in an I in the chat if you are here, or a reaction, like I know we were together. I did think about doing a quick recap. I just want to know where I'm picking up from where we started last time. So I'm just quickly looking at the chat. I'm not sure if it's the same space. You can let me know, Jay and Sheila, if you can see. So just put in a reaction in the chat or an I. If you are not there, you can say, give me an N, then I'll know you were not there last time, and I'll just quickly pick up from where we left off. So if you are I, yes, you are there. Thank you for the eyes. If you're not there, let me know so I can just know how and where to pick up.
We have two eyes.
Yes, let's please have our feedback so we can know, were you there, were you not there? And of course, I can just quickly recap. I'm just gonna still nonetheless recap. I want to see where I'm recapping from. Is it a completely fresh recap or, fresher, or are we just picking up? So again, I'll keep an eye on the chat. From the chat, I can see.
We have three N's and two I's.
Right. So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. So we have those who are not there. I think quite a few. I can see you. I see you, Simon. I see you, Lucy. I see you, Billy, and Jennifer. It's great to see you, Jennifer, and I. Isaac, lovely to see you. Isaac, I know we've also interacted. That's Isaac of Stage Pass. It's lovely to see people who I have interacted with before. It's lovely to see you all, and I'm glad we can be able to connect here. Excellent. Thank you very much for the feedback. Keep it coming. I'd like us to keep the chat and this conversation as highly interactive, as interactive as possible. So very quickly, without further ado, I'm just going to quickly put up my deck, and then of course we can go through this together. We can go through this together. So just one moment. So from a very first, let me call it first principle, we did ask ourselves the question, what is culture? And I think it's very important to define culture, even as we go into what culture first leadership is. And so I believe my screen is visible. Do confirm you can see my screen. On the question of what is culture. And culture, by this particular definition, is said to be the shared beliefs, values, and practices that any particular group of people have. In this case, in a corporate context, we'll be talking about an organization, a team, a group of people, right? So what is that shared set of beliefs, values, and practices? Now, of course, there are many other versions and quotes around what culture is, very many. One of the things that culture has been defined as is what you celebrate, what you allow, what you tolerate. So it's what you tolerate, what you celebrate, what you, sort of like integrate to be part of the organization. So that's one definition. And of course, I've said culture is also what you celebrate, tolerate, and allow. So it's not just about this set of shared beliefs, values, and practices. And often, for those who are familiar with the iceberg theory, you would know that we have the tip of the iceberg, which is overt and observable above the surface. Then we have what we call the area beneath the iceberg, which is the biggest part of the iceberg, which is what sinks ships. And so what is above the tip of the iceberg is what is on our website, what is on our reception wall, our mission, vision, values. What is below the iceberg is now where the rubber hits the road. It's it's the assumptions. It's the meetings after the meeting in the corridors by the water cooler. It's the conversations that happen where when you have strategy discussions, you have high impact, very clear focused vision that actually say, "Your story, Missy only." I don't think this can happen. That's culture. So culture is not just what we see overtly, well painted on our website, social media, on our reception walls. It's what is not spoken. It's the unspoken. In fact, the unspoken has much more weight than the spoken. So that's a snapshot of culture. We spoke about culture. Could remember our first interaction, Jay, sometime back is around culture code. When I spoke about culture code with the IHRM, and of course we did say that culture code, of course, code is highly borrowed from the world of tech. And we talked about culture code is an operating system that powers our organization. In other words, it is what drives everything we do. It's what drives everything we do. And the culture code then is something we have built into how our organization runs. And a code, by definition, is many things. A code is, like a encrypted, if I can use that sort of language. It's an encrypted message that, of course, is encrypted on one side. Is the word encrypted? And it's encrypted on one side and decoded on the other side, or coded on one side and decoded on the other side. That is clear. And the thing about code, just like in computers and just like in any other, technology, architecture, it has two parties. It's where the signal is sent from and where the signal is received from. And for it to work effectively, there needs to be some correlation. And so when we talk about culture code, we talk about organizational culture, it means that whether it's from the leadership, there's a certain messaging, coding, transcription that is put out. This is how we do things here. This is where we are going as an organization. Then from the people who follow that leadership, there's that receptor or receiving of the code and unlocking of the code. And the interesting thing about sometimes code, and even when we unpack some of these things, people even run with it to a whole other level. And so even as we speak about what our culture is, our value system, our beliefs, what we allow, what to tolerate, what to celebrate, a code goes a step further. We can literally build into what we do. And even those who don't know us or have not been with us for a long time, they just find themselves slipping or sliding into that way of being and that way of doing things. If people know the story that's often told about monkeys in a cage. It was an experiment that was done. You can look it up, where they came up with a mechanism where they would put bananas or some treat in the cage. And when the animals, or rather the monkeys, would reach out for the treat, the bananas for that matter, whatever it is that was there, all of them would be sprayed with water. And as the story goes, because it was an awful and pleasant experience, there's been sprayed with water. All of them, not just the one that reached out, became something that caused them not to desire to have those. In other words, if any animal, reached out for the bananas, they would be sprayed with water. Now, here's the interesting thing. Assuming there were 6 monkeys, at some point, they removed one monkey and replaced it with another monkey. And so now you had 5 old monkeys from the older group and 1 new monkey. And as you'd imagine, when the new monkey went in, naturally reached out for the streets, for the bananas. And of course, as you'd expect, they were all sprayed. But actually, what happened when they changed this again and brought another monkey, all the monkeys that have been there, the old monkeys, quickly deterred the new monkey from reaching out. In fact, I think they even beat it or something. And the story goes that, of course, at some point, the spraying with water stopped because the deterrent or the being deterred by the other monkeys would cause them not to reach for the treats. Long story short, the original group eventually was replaced, and we ended up with a new group that had never experienced the spraying with water, what are also known as the unpleasantness. However, we had a full crop of animals that have been developed the skill of deterring new animals or new monkeys from grabbing the bananas or grabbing the treat. So what I'm basically saying is, even without the real consequence or the real stimulus behind the unpleasant experience, the water being sprayed with water, it had been coded into these monkeys. These are animals from the animal kingdom, that those bananas or those treats are a no-go zone. You don't touch. And it reached a point where creatures or new animals that had come into this cage, we had no experience, no actual understanding of why we deter people from doing this, had become so convicted. And as you can imagine, they had actually coded into the little cage community that you'd not eat those bananas, you'd not reach for that goal. So just to give context to what I'm talking about, That's what the code really is about. We have ways, and these are just animals which are not as sophisticated. Now, as human beings, you can imagine in our organizations, in our society, in our communities, there are many things we have been able to hardwire and code into how we do life. And that's where culture code comes in. So I'd love to just get some feedback in the chat, even as we're talking about this. What's jumping at you? What do you think about the culture where you are? And perhaps, could there be things that have been built in or hardwired into your organization even as you go? So of course, there are a couple of people who have an undue advantage because I've interacted with them before, so I know their industry and whatnot. I'd love to know if you are in HR space, feel free to put in a HR. If you're in finance, you can give me a fin. If you're in, operations or something, just give me a bit of context so that I can know where you're coming from, even as you continue this conversation. And let's keep the conversation going with the chat so that we can at least have feedback that is, and we can take the conversation in a direction that is much more relevant to where we are. Good to see you, Jennifer. I can see we have a couple of people from HR. Let's keep it coming. And I'd love to know what your experiences are also, even as we talk about the issue of the culture code. So moving on, I'll keep an eye, and Sheila, you can also just let me know if there's something that I need to pay attention to in the chat box. Now, quickly going into culture first leadership. We did speak about the fact that culture first leaders will always succeed. In other words, culture first leaders will always be ahead. There'll be leaps and bounds ahead of those who are not culture first. In other words, for those who culture is at the heart of what they do, it's going to be a major driver of the organization's success. Performance will not be an issue. Attracting the right kind of talent will not be an issue. Retaining talent will not be an issue. Issues like innovation, people will be comfortable and a bit more open to taking risks. Decision making is not necessarily centralized, but we can have more and more people involved in decision making. There are things around the employer brand or the brand of the organization that would work for good. And that's what we talk about when we reflect on culture first leaders. Perhaps what I would do, Jay, just for the sake of those who were not there, and because we want them to at least be able to explain, so perhaps you could share some of the I could share some of the notes from the previous session and just give a little bit more meat to what we're talking about for their sake. I love the feedback from Jennifer. It says that, of course, from that graphic illustration, culture in reality is a knee-jerk. You believe culture is knee-jerk. It's a knee-jerk reaction to anything in a setup. So it's much more around the what, don't do that. If I can go up, take it further, rather than the why you do it or why we don't do it. And so that's why, if indeed we really do need leaders who are the initiators. Remember, we talked about a code or a signal. So the signal that people pick up, signal that's sent out, has to come from a certain source. And so culture first leadership basically means setting the tone. I dare say, we have seen in our national and global geopolitics that the way leaders carry themselves literally impacts the entire ecosystem of where we live. So very quickly, I'll just go quickly transition into elements that we need to think through around our culture first leadership, even as we think and see how then we make this a reality. So I love this image. I find it very inspiring, just around what it means to have a team involved, culture around winning, culture around togetherness, culture around, modeling the desired behaviors, creating a sense of belonging, a sense of oneness, from the recruiting, from the place of performance in terms of goal setting, in terms of recognition of people, and how even we communicate about what is to be done, whether it's policies, whether it's changes, whether it's issues around our product, and also feedback mechanisms. It's always about feeling I belong, we're in this together, and it's not just a top up, sorry, not bottom down, bottom up. It's not just a top-down cascade. We're actually involved in things around strategy. We're involved in how we're evolving to our products, our processes, and how we engage with our clients. And of course, I must give a special mention to this customer service month for some people and customer service week. So one of the things we do in our company is that we almost always seek to help organizations grow their culture to impact and support strategy. We do say that culture is strategy for breakfast. And I think last time we were here, we spoke the fact that we do discover it's actually leaders that eat strategy for breakfast, because leaders are the custodians of culture. And for us, when we support organizations, we constantly and very consciously seek to help them develop a culture that actually supports the strategy. So we seek to reverse the damaging effect of culture eating strategy for breakfast. And for us, the most successful, sustainable, winning strategy is strategy where you support all facets of the organization and all teams of the organization to be client-centered in what they do. Client-centered and client-centric. So we'll get a little bit into that. So very quickly, I just want to share a schematic which I think will be useful for this conversation, which basically shows us how you actually can be able to get the right culture to support strategy. And of course, there are different routes and different paths. We have the inspiration path, which I'll quickly unpack. We have the information path, and we have the intimidation path. In reality, these are all paths people take. Now, look at the inspiration path. This is done through leadership and leadership tools, leadership interventions. And of course, we have role modeling, we have vision, you have to create the vision, a picture of the future that creates passion. With vision comes storytelling. There's a very powerful, if it's one thing I would call a very powerful tool in culture change, it is storytelling, the power of stories, the power of people, being able to bring the issues of the clients, the pain of our customers center, front and center. One of the projects we've always been very proud of and successful, and we call a big success, is our journey with Chloride Exide, where we supported them to be able to make their processes, right from even the reader who delivers the battery, the dialer battery, so connected to the story of the client, to why the client must be served in a better way. Of course, conversations are close to that, and of course, persuasion. So in other words, you're getting people to move towards the culture you want through inspiration and through influence. John Maxwell says that leadership and influence is actually helping or getting people to do what you want because they want to do it. So as we seek towards culture-first leadership, we must continuously pursue inspiration. I'd say it's the top tier. It's the very best, the very best. And of course, then the next level is management tools, which we know. They're all the disciplines we have in management. And of course, deeply steeped in culture is tradition, ritual, and measurement. In other words, management culture. But then, of course, a blend between leadership and management is, of course, negotiation, strategic planning, decision making, and of course, learning. So that sits in between leadership and management. And of course, the one which is the go-to for most organizations, in fact, this is literally where we start, is intimidation, where we use threats, punishment. In fact, I remember being involved in a strategy workshop once, which we had, I'll never forget that. And the gentleman we work with was Benjamin, who keeps reminding me, it's more than 5 years ago, about how shocked I was when a manager stood up and said, in this type of organization, we must intimidate people to get them to do what they want. And he was so convicted, and I could not believe my ears. That a manager that senior would say that I cannot think of a better way. I cannot think of a better way to be able to deliver the outcomes and results you want, but through intimidation. People must be fearful. People must fear us. And if I'm not wrong, there are people who literally subscribe to this. And I'm glad it's well positioned at the bottom of this schematic, where we talk about coercion, threats, punishment, and of course, cash, fiat cash, So there's only so much you can do. There's only so far you can actually be able to get people to do what you want through those methods. And of course, between management tools and intimidation sits some systems. And this is interesting because I'd like to add coaching in there. Of course, you have controlling systems, hiring, firing, definition of roles / JDs, incentive systems, promotion, training, disincentives, and of course, procedures, SOPs, right? Unfortunately, sometimes and oftentimes coaching is placed in here, where coaching is used as a management tool or even as a power tool, as opposed to being used as a leadership tool. In other words, people sometimes have been, unfortunately, or have given sad stories of how coaching turned out to be a very painful experience, and perhaps it was being used to set them up. So I'd like to just take a minute to catch my breath and just get some feedback from you who are hearing me. And I know you're hearing me. I'm gonna allow me to just, you can either chat in, you can speak into the call. We're not that many, so we can at least speak freely. I'd love to know from those who especially were not with us, Lucy or Simon or Faith, whoever is ready to go, what's shouting at you? What is shouting at you, rather screaming at you regarding what we're talking about, especially around what we've just talked about. And I've picked on you deliberately because, of course, you did share that you were not with us. So now that you're able to catch up a little bit, I'd love just to hear what is jumping at you from what I've shared. And, you can either put it in the chat or you can also just speak out. We are not that many, so I'm sure it'll be great to hear your voice. What is speaking to you largely around what I've just shared last week? Thank you. Someone is speaking, please go ahead. Or was that you, Jay?
I think it was Terry. Terry, you have something?
Oops, no, sorry.
All right, if the floor is open, I'd love to get some feedback from those who have at least been able to catch up. What's jumped at you from what I've shared so far? Please, let's hear from you. This session was really largely to be a forum, a forum where we can exchange ideas and thoughts around what's applicable in your case. And I'm still looking out to see the different industries. I can see we have HR represented, quite a bit of HR people. Yeah, let us know your industries and just what your thoughts are about what I've shared so far. Terry, now that you were speaking, maybe you could just let us know. I know you didn't intentionally seek to speak. Yeah, but what's big for you so far from what little that you've been able to hear on the recap? What's standing out for you? You there, Terry?
You got me off guard, George. I'm listening in the middle of doing other stuff. Allow me to listen kidogo too, then I'll come back.
Not a
with my
problem, not a
nuggets
problem.
later.
Something interesting. The other day I was speaking to someone, they told me, but then George, I loved your session, but I have a confession to make. And I don't know if this is true. And I'm sure, Jay, you get a lot of this kind of feedback. Your session, or rather these sessions are usually, sometimes they catch me within the family and sometimes I could be in the kitchen, but I make sure I log in. So you can be forgiven, especially if I'm not going to ask you to confirm whether you're in that category. And in the middle of attending
That's me, and I'm sorry about it. Allow
No
me
need to
some 5
apologize.
minutes to settle.
These are all our roles. These are all our roles. So and I can see the feedback coming in. These are all our roles. So it's actually a blessing that you're able to double hat, take care of things on the home front, and also be present here. And I know your mind is quite engaged as well. Thank you for the feedback, Lucy. I can see you saying that different organizations have existing cultures, and it's quite challenging, especially when you come in as a HR and you are required to turn things around. A mix of the three can work. That's deep. That's deep. And I think I also feel your pain when you talk about the fact that is it fair to say sometimes people literally think you're a miracle worker or expect you to do magic? You've been there for 3 months. In fact, one of my colleagues loves to say that it takes you at least 6 months to figure out what's really going on. This is what you're told when you get the offer letter and whatnot. You do the orientation, you're there for a month, 2 months, maybe even 3. You think you have figured out what's going on, but you really haven't. I think when you're hitting about month 6 or thereabout, that's when you start to realize, these are the things they did, and maybe attended a board meeting or two. These are things that I wasn't really told by the headhunter, or by the board when they were hiring me. And the expectation is through the roof, and the support sometimes, unfortunately, may not be as much. And it's one thing to not have support, but there are also cases where you find people actually waiting for you to throw in the towel and fail. Lucy, I don't know if I'm speaking to a reality that you probably have seen, and I don't want you to necessarily quote anything or anyone, but the expectation from what I'm picking from you, and I've had this from many HR professionals, is usually sky high. People expect miracles, and there's only so much you can do in the limited or with the finite resources you have. Thank you for that feedback. So I think we can continue together in the interest of time. Oh, Terry, it's good to see you. And thank you for joining in as well. And I can see a few more people are coming in, and it's lovely to see. I don't know why it is when I stopped sharing, I just saw your name. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Great. So carrying on with what we were talking about, let me just get my screen back up. How then do we create now a culture first leadership? I'm going to quickly pick a tangent from what has been shared by Lucy. And because I do realize the majority of us here are HR professionals, how do you manage the scenario when you come in and you're flying solo? You need to create magic. Let me use the word create magic, or do wonders. And you can tell you're flying this journey solo, you're flying this plane alone. How then do you change things? So I'm going to quickly share two key things about culture, perspectives that we need to think about critically. Now, the fact of the matter is changing culture is a large-scale undertaking. It's not a one-person job. It's not one HOD who can change culture in an organization. And it goes not just from HR, goes into, a lot of maker-checker departments like finance, operations, risk, compliance, And it's not just about processes, it's about changing people's mindset, people's attitude, and collectively, the minds of people in the organization. Let me go further to say that the reality about changing culture is that changing culture in some organizations actually goes as deep as changing the brand identity. We are now getting to marketing. And that means that there's an internal image of the company or the organization or the brand, and there's an external image of the organization and the brand. And the fact of the matter is, some organizations, and for the HR, let me speak of, or even the CEOs who have come into organizations, you find an organization with a damaged brand or damaged reputation. And changing culture or changing the brand is more than just going to an ad agency and getting a new color scheme and a new logo. In fact, new logo color scheme is literally like whitewashing, what in the Bible is called whitewashing the cup or washing the cup outside. And you've not done anything at the core of what the organization is. So it's a far-reaching engagement, goes into the very core, the very soul of the organization. And you must capture the hearts and the minds of everybody. And to be honest, if you can't sell a culture change internally, there's no way you'll be able to convince the outside world that your organization is something else, right? Then, of course, we know famous single fixes. You get an agile or a Kaizen expert, or lean, Six Sigma to come in and we say we're going to change it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying those processes and process improvement interventions are not useful. But often, some of those tend to be very, can you call it, localized treatments. You want to fix something around something in one of your systems. But whilst they're useful and good, they really miss out sometimes on the bigger picture in terms of, are we collectively revamping everything we do? Are we looking at how we do what we do, what is our route to market, what is how we service our customers, how our mindset is, our attitude, the things that perhaps have the patterns of comfort we have slipped into, So it's a complete turnaround. Like what used to be said by the famous politician who is now late, no stone needs to be left unturned. And I want to just see some feedback on the chat. Yeah. For you, where you sit, is your culture change process much more around certain interventions, or has it actually been? Okay, this is assuming, and I'd like to know whether where are you in your culture change journey? Are you literally just midway? Have you just started? Are you considering it? Where are you on your journey? And for those who are already in the culture change journey, for you, would you say it has been can we say, all-encompassing, a large scale, or has it just been touching here, touching there, touching there? I'm really curious to hear what your experience is. And I'd love to hear a real use case. For anybody who's comfortable to share, I'd really love to hear a real use case. Those who have been able to engage in some culture change projects. I don't know if Irene is there. Irene, I know. Maybe you could just confirm. I'm not going to ask you to speak, but Irene, are you there? Irene, I know an Irene who's also in the HR field and is a dear friend. You could confirm at some point. Yeah. So I'd love to see. Just let me know some feedback. And Jay, if some feedback has come in, please let me know. What is the real situation on ground? It's good for us to talk about what the real situation on the ground is? What are your experiences around changing culture so far? Are you on a culture journey? Are you thinking about it? Where are you? I just want to take stock of who's on the call and where are you? Are you on a culture journey? How is it going? Are you thinking about it? Where are you on this journey? I really want to hear. I really want to hear where the people on this call are. Do let me know, Jay, if there's anything coming up. Maybe if I've missed something.
There's nothing.
So maybe, Jay, I can ask you to also, even as we wait for someone to comment, what are your thoughts and the experience you've had with the people you with the supported different organizations? What has been your experience in terms of people's perception of culture? Has it been, for those you may have been asked to actually support, has it been more of just a one-off, or has it been all-encompassing? Have people actually gone the whole hog, or have they done just what we call light version? Give me the light version. What has been your experience, Jay? Let me ask before I come back.
Now, for most companies that I've worked with, and in terms of culture, just trying to set up a good culture. Most of them, we find that most organizations do not have proper culture, and even as you try to develop one, you need to get feedback from the existing members of staff. So as you do this, you'll find that there are areas where you'll find that staff are always negative about the organization and what the organization is doing in terms of the existing culture. So getting feedback from this team sometimes now shows you the real what is real on the ground. You might have a different feeling looking at the culture from an outside perspective, but once you get in now, you start seeing a totally different thing, like than what you are seeing. So now, just stepping in, and most cases you'll find that they are painting the organization a different picture than what is in existence. Basically, that is what I've been getting in the organization that I'm guiding. Then, with time now, by starting to understanding these gaps and then being able to work on the gaps, so that now you can be able to mold a culture that staff will feel engaged, and a culture that staff will feel will welcome. Also takes time now. You have to put in strategies that can be able to help you achieve that.
Thank you, Jay. I actually was outside for a bit. My apologies. But I know the people on the call were able to hear you. I heard you at least for probably the first minute or so. Then I had a small technical hitch. But
Yes.
do you mind just coming up again the last 30 seconds, kindly? Sorry
Yes.
about that. I was literally I dropped off for a short while.
Oh, sorry.
I had the first maybe 1 minute, but I may have missed about 30 seconds to a minute in between. If you don't mind, you could just come back, just for my sake, kindly.
I was saying that basically, I was saying that for organizations that have been guiding, organizations that I support in terms of their HR functions, you'll find that I try to get feedback from the organizations, from the existing staff members. And in most cases, you'll find the staff members painting the organizational culture as negative. So as I get this feedback, I'm able to mold or develop strategies that I can be able to use now to develop a culture that is acceptable to the staff and even to the organization. So in most cases, organizations that do not have HR in place are struggling to have a culture that is acceptable even to the staff. Now, there seems like there's competition where the staff pulling one side and the management of the organization is pulling the other side. So being able to develop this culture is something that now you have to even take the staff through training and even the management, so that now they can see the value of working together as one team. And now this needs you to build strategies that can be able to help you build a culture that is acceptable. Hello.
Thank you so much, Jay. Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you so much, Jay. I was just taking a minute to. I'm also still trying to get in on the my main machine, but yes, Indeed, what I would say is that it's a very all-encompassing, for lack of a better words, an all-encompassing journey. And in reality, it's very difficult to actually get it done, so to speak. It's very difficult to get it done without getting all people on board. In fact, in my experience, if I can say that, what I would actually say I've observed is where projects have not been able to get very far. It's actually because we haven't had all people on board, all the key people. And sometimes what I've observed is that the person driving it can't feel like they're walking the journey alone. They're walking the journey alone. I think I'm coming back in. Okay, great. So very quickly, I want to now Jay or Sheila, kindly just reactivate my screen sharing ability, kindly. We try it again.
Okay, let me allow. I think I've given you the right.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So very quickly, we will back up and share that. Now, when we talk about culture, we need to agree or understand that culture is learned behavior. It's not a byproduct of the rules, overlays, or regulation. And we have seen for a fact, just tying to what we've talked about, and Jay has commented that the quality of our senior leadership, not the HR, and that's something HR need to think very carefully about, the quality of our senior leadership. And so in terms of who are the people in those offices, who are those people in those positions? And by extension, what does a senior leadership as a unit look like? Has a very big or a very measurable impact, right? About whether companies will be successful or not in their culture change journeys, So just a thought here. And I want to give you quickly, this is just a bit of statistics around, how much the performance has been in terms of return on equity, and of course, what happens when the correlation between effective leadership to the correlation between ineffective leadership. I have some tips, John, to quickly go through that we need to think about as, so to speak, do's and don'ts. I'm just seeing something in the chat. Can you hear me now? Someone said
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, we can hear you. I don't know, maybe Neptune. I don't know if it's your side, but then we can get you clearly.
All right. So very quickly, thank you for that. I just want to quickly go through what we'd call the do's and don'ts that are either where you win it or lose it in culture change journey. So quick do, come with a clear vision of where you want the organization to go and promote that vision quickly and rapidly. And even I use the word forcefully with your leadership. And remember, the battle is won or lost at the leadership team. So think about clearly, what is your vision? Where do you want this to go? But you have to sell it. And we say culture needs to be sold. You need to sell it and they need to buy it. Then you have to quickly develop and put in place systems and processes to support and reinforce that vision of the future. Otherwise, it's just a good story. It's just a good picture. So it's not just about telling them, because they'll buy the next thing, they'll tell you, how do we go there? Thank you for selling us. We want to go there. What is the road to Canaan? So what are the systems? What is the roadmap? How do you get there? Then, of course, you have to begin to introduce and reinforce consistently and constantly the values of radical transparency and continuous improvement. You must quickly be able to bring to people, how do people, get there? What are the values that will get us where we need to do? And what I say about culture, just a quick tip I'll give you. Culture needs to be, even as you do it, because culture journeys are long. Are you able to get quick wins, what we call low-hanging fruits, things that can actually turn around fairly quickly? So people can say, this thing, by the way, let me pick a name. This thing that, and it can't be a CEO for those who are CEOs here. This thing that Doreen, I'm assuming Doreen may not be a CEO, or this thing that, Ivy is saying, I think it's working. The last board meeting we were presenting, this thing that Jennifer was pushing, I think it's actually, maybe she has something. So what are those quick wins that you can see that can actually be tied to the values? And people start to see, hey, by the way, let's give this thing a try. Then, of course, you must communicate horizontally in these conversations and stories, not top down. So how do you get, for instance, if it's finance, You get your peers at HOD level, for those who are at HOD level, the finance person, the operations person, the risk person, the business development person or commercial, etc., to be able to understand it and become now the people who can take it, rather than having it coming from just a very high level coming down. And storytelling, remember storytelling, it's a very powerful thing. In fact, one of the trainings we have found very useful is helping people to have effective presentation, effective storytelling. Therefore, you have a way of compelling people to go the journey that you're going. And of course, you need to get core stakeholders of a new vision, right? Who are the key or core stakeholders? Identify them quickly, whether you have change champions, right? That will be able to constantly keep us accountable about how we're going on this journey, keeping us on track, right? And then, of course, even give them the power. They can present to the management team. For those, some they can even present to the board. Give them the power, give them even the visibility that come with it, Then, of course, you must be very careful to show what is the role, what is the function of managers, right? In these teams that are being put together, and how they're able to empower and activate those highly skilled, highly passionate individuals. Now, what are the major don'ts? You can see fewer don'ts, more do's. Don't start by reorganizing, especially for organizations we work with, which sometimes tend to go into a org restructure. You want to change certain things, because what it often does is it creates fear, it creates panic, and creates dread. People like, this culture thing, we don't want it. It's not good, right? So you have to be careful. Much as sometimes the systems or the processes will show this organization or reorg needs to happen. How can you do a reorg? In fact, we've talked about doing a bottom-up reorg. How can you do a revamp of the organizational structure, but let it come from a process that was from the people? They were able to give feedback to the business and say, the way we do, and one of our most successful projects literally has that. We had people down the ranks in the business be able to say, there are certain elements of how we develop our products, in terms of how we service our clients, that just don't work. I wish we could do it this way. And what happens when the feedback comes from below, people then actually begin to see, this was our idea. This is us who are changing the structure. It's us who are changing the way we go to the market, the way we service our clients, versus coming from the top, where people start feeling they're coming for our jobs. They try to get rid of some of us. Then, of course, you have to be very, very careful, because there's a temptation sometimes to fly in or bring in new faces because of some different reasons. But what if we actually empowered and upskilled the existing people in the team to be able to drive the culture change journey? So I don't know how well versed we are with the Zoom tool and what device you're using, but if you're on a laptop, you might be very well able to, make some marks on the slide. I would be really curious if you're able to, for those who are not multitasking, and if you're multitasking, you can always add this as a added layer of, added layer of tasks. Feel free to just put a note on what is really speaking to you at this point. What is really speaking to you on this point? Feel free, you can use the annotate tool, but you don't have to use the annotate. You can even just type in something in the chat. You could even unmute your mic. I believe we are almost within the holiday zone. It must be Utamaduni Day somewhere in the world. So we're going to let you, speak freely, because that's, I said, we are not as many. That's the beauty of this kind of conversation. We can be able to hear each other, we can be able to give feedback. What's jumping at you from what you're looking at, feel free to annotate if you need to, or if you want to, feel free to speak into your mic. Feel free to type in the chat. All these are available to you. I really want to get your feedback. And it's very useful that this is not like a monologue, but of course a very rich dialogue, which I know it is. So what is speaking to you greatly on these do's and don'ts of the culture journey that is, of course, led by culture past leaders?
George, Isaac here.
Hey, Isaac. Good to hear your voice.
Good. Asante sana. Mine is not in relation to the some of the points on your slide,
Yes.
but maybe as we wait for guys to answer, I just wanted to find out, most of the time you realize people can always tell when things are working and when things are not working. And you'll always maybe sometimes even hear them having a conversation. Maybe they should do this one this way and all that. But then you realize when you start bringing some of those change and solution into the table, again, you get that resentment. They don't want that again. How do you tackle that? Because even when you talk about culture, you find as you provide those solutions, it's part of your culture journey. You're trying to evolve from one thing to the other. But then you find the same people who are complaining, this is not working, this is not working again. They're the ones fighting the same, even if it's something that majority of
Came
the
from
time
them.
is working for them.
It came
Yeah,
from them.
how do you tackle that?
How do you
Yeah,
deal
how
with
do
it? I
you
think the
tackle
one
that?
thing I love that. I think some of our greatest detractors, and I think Bill Gates says that his biggest critics are where he's been able to develop his best, I think, products and solutions. So it's not an easy journey, but then of course, what I would say that the opportunity that lies there is those loudest voices are sometimes the most powerful, important tools. How do we actually begin to even let me say charge them? You know, those loud voices. Yeah, put them in those positions, put them in those positions. If you know what I mean, put them in those positions. Yeah, you are going to be the chairman of this committee, or you're going to be a member in this committee. And then now you're actually binding them. Let me say that. I don't know if you can see how cheeky that is. You're quote unquote binding them to one, develop them, and then they have to be the mouthpiece. I don't know if you get what I mean by that. So that someone cannot turn around and the very thing that they came through a process and presented to the business, then say this thing is not working. They will still have to go and tell the business in the town hall or whatever, how is this thing which we came up with? Okay, you see where I'm going with this? How is this thing
Yes, I get your point.
we developed? So, and that's actually a huge opportunity. These culture change initiatives are a huge opportunity to raise up leaders. Some of those very, let me call it, unlikely leaders have come from these processes. And for leadership, and of course, Isaac, we've interacted quite a bit. For people in leadership, it's sometimes uncharted water, especially where you would then now delegate, quote unquote, some of this power and some of this responsibility. But of course, what we have seen, and I remember speaking on one of the projects we worked with, where people agreed, it was a large organization in tech that has reporting, into many countries, into SA, and then of course into Europe. And they actually were able to do a kind of like a matrix of decisions that they can actually devolve, and it will not break the business. So you can actually map out and say, this one, sasa nyinyi muambue. And whatever you decide, that is what we will go with. Do you get my point? So you carved out some things which are critical, some which are very critical because of factors, certain risk and other elements. And then once you devolve those things that this decision we're not going to make, you're literally going on strike, quote unquote. Isaac, you and probably your senior leadership team.
Sure.
If you people say we will do this thing like this, and we will eat what all year, we will eat that. I don't know if you're getting my point. That the
Yes,
meal
I understand.
take it, and you literally give them power, real power, on the things that are not earth-shattering. I'm not saying, you know what I mean. There's some things that can sink the business. So you have to map out and say, this one we can accept. But then now you say, now once you decide this thing, you know what I mean? We will not touch it. So you choose your fate, choose our fate. Our fate is in your hands. And sometimes when we start with small things like, this year, what will be our theme for our CSR? Where will we go? Certain things which are, for lack of a better word, may not necessarily be earth-shattering or whatever, whether it's our end of year activities, including team building and whatnot. And I've seen organizations where sometimes it can be very, for lack of a better word, it can be a very arduous process to even just pick a venue or pick a provider. But what I've seen is people come out feeling very empowered. And sometimes the loudest voices, which are not always the best, carry the day. But then, of course, now it's a reality we all have to live with. And then next time the convention comes around, those people may not have as much power. But go ahead. I think Isaac, you wanted to comment. Or was it Isaac or someone else? Was it you, Isaac?
I was just saying good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac.
Isaac. Sad.
So as we continue, I'm just wondering how we are doing. I know it's now past the hour, Jay, but I want to stand guided by you, and Sheila and the team. I'm just guided in terms of how we can proceed in terms of our time and the conversation.
You can proceed.
Right.
I was muted.
Okay, thank you. So even as we are sort of like reflecting and probably thinking of what we want to come in with, I just want to remind us, we shared this last time, but I think it's a very important fact to have around, this is from AIHR, to have the fact that this is based on feedback from Gallup Strength Finder and the Gallup system. They say that organizations with strong cultures improve their performance in the following 4 areas. Number one, engagement. Employee engagement is high. In fact, you get up to 50% increasement. And for those who are having pain around employee engagement, you know what it means to have a higher productivity, higher engagement level, up to 50-point increase in 3 years. Of course, net profit increase, the data on that, up to 85% over 5 years. There's growth in your workforce, up to 25% growth in your workforce. And then there's also a higher level of patronage, 138% improvement over 5 years. So I would say that there's a good reason. There's a good reason to work on our culture. Then, of course, and I believe because of time, I'm just getting into closing remarks. The fact of the matter is, leaders, it's all about leadership. It's all about leadership. And the biggest battle to be won is leadership. It says that leaders make and break organizations. So we really have to win the battle at our leader level. But then, of course, for all of us, I would like to just say, to be able to change culture, you need to change minds, period. There's no culture change that's going to happen without changing people's minds. That's where the battle is also to be won, once you now win the battle with leadership. To be able to change culture, change minds, and then you have a chance of changing the culture. Because it's the eve of a holiday, I'm tempted to bring our conversation to a close, and I feel like many of us are sort of easing into holiday mode. I don't want to be the person that is standing in between you and the unspecified pre-holiday activity, the pre-utamaduni, is it utamaduni, not utamaduni, mazingira day activity. So Jay, I beg that we land it home, but I did hear you say that we'll be coming back. We are likely to come back for a 3rd installment.
Yeah, sure.
Perhaps in a month or so. Yeah.
Yes, I think the holiday mood has started.
It's kicked in proper.
Yes.
There are people who are saying, please don't call on me to unmute my mic. And then it will not be background noise, really.
It has been activated.
But it's been lovely still connecting with us here.
Yeah.
I'm happy to come in if it means even see in a couple of weeks. Now that we've done, I think the last time was in September. We'll probably do one sometime in November before now the real holiday kicks in. Yeah,
that's sure.
The real kicks in. Maybe I could ask that each of us gives us a quick takeaway. You can put in the chat. I'm not going to ask you to speak. You could just give, even if it's 3 or 4 words. My takeaway is or would be a three-letter statement. For me, culture is this. Just for me to know and have a picture of what you're doing, what you're taking from this conversation, even as we wrap up. What's your quick takeaway? What are you leaving here with that you may not have had coming in? Could be 2 words, 3 words, 4 words, however you want to do it. And then we shall bring this call to an end. Never, see, they're coming in. You change culture, you must change mindset. Love that. Thank you for those who are putting it in. I like that from Isaac, never arrive. If you arrive, I presume what you're saying is that you feel you're there, you're not there, I presume. You can always validate that. To change culture, you must change minds, clarity of vision. Love that. Thank you, Kendo. Yeah, I love that. Leaders break or make culture. Culture starts with mindset shift. Thank you, Sheila. DK, culture starts with you. And of course, we know that the fish rots from the head. So as a leader, you work on changing the mindsets of your fellow leaders. Thank you for that, DK. It's a very loaded one. It's a truth. The battle is won or lost, the management team. The first step, which is what I think DK is speaking into, is always the hardest, but go for it. Aha, thank you for that. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Lucy. And Simon says, reward or recognize positive culture. Guys are deep. Mind shift, short and sweet, Naomi. Mind shift. Love that. Love that. Love that. You know what? I feel we've done justice to this evening conversation. I would not want to be the one holding us back from activating Mazingira Day mode fully. And so with that, I say, Kwaheri. Let me just give my LinkedIn or any other. I can give my number. I'll put it in the chat. Feel free to SMS me or whatever if you want
Sure.
to pick it up. If you have a burning one, which is you don't want to put it in plenary. Thank you, Billy. As a manager, you're an enabler of self-organizing teams. And that's my phone number there. And you can also hit me up on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn, especially George Ngugi. And most of the other social media as George Ngugi. And let's keep the conversation going. It's been a truly big pleasure. And back to you, Jay. Asante sana. It's always a joy.
Thank you so much, George. As always, it's been so insightful. We look forward to round 3. I'll give the mic back to Sheila to close for us.
Yeah.